So, how is everyone? I hope you're all well. I was about to say what day it is, and then I realised, yet again, I've forgotten what day it is. I think it's Thursday. Let's get straight into the meat and potatoes and talk about a video I did yesterday. Now, look, some of you are not happy whenever you talk about, this surviving member. Dylan Mortensen is a survivor in your eyes. She survived. She should be left alone. And this is what I said yesterday. And I also said that she would not be left alone. When she goes to court, she's not going to be left alone. And people can't understand that. There are questions that this situation raises, and they can't be ignored. And I'm going to touch on some things that people brought up, because there's a saying, and the saying is, you can't have your cake and eat it. And some people misinterpret what that actually means. But what it actually means is, you can't eat a cake and still have your cake. And I think what people are not understanding is that for Dylan Mortensen's story to truly make sense, you have to have your cake and eat it, if that makes sense. Because you have to ignore certain elements of it. People have said about PTSD. This is not PTSD. I live on a military base. I speak to people, I know people who suffer from PTSD, and she has not got PTSD. This is not a situation of PTSD. And I'll tell you why they have not themselves said about PTSD or mentioned it, because then it brings into disrepute her eyewitness account, which could be a very, very important factor in this case. But it could ultimately be the thing that hangs them if they can prove that this girl turning around and saying, yes, I physically saw someone leave and gave a description of them, and that turns out to be coerced, they have a problem. And why do we think it could have been coerced? Because on one hand, you've got someone saying one story, and another one, you've got someone saying something else. Originally, we didn't even realise that Dylan Mortensen was on the same floor as Xana and Ethan. That came out later, that she was on the same floor. Now, let's talk about this for a second. Now, in the affidavit, and you can go and read this yourself and read what is said in there. But let me just take you through some of the little excerpts of it. And that is that Dylan Mortensen had opened her door not once, not twice, but 3 times. Because she had heard noises. Her and Bethany had both said that everyone was home and everyone was in bed, asleep, or at least in their rooms, by 4 a.m. Apart from Xana, who would take the delivery of a DoorDash delivery around 4 a.m. And there is information contained within the affidavit that puts Xana on her phone at around 17 minutes past 4 in the morning on TikTok. So we're hearing that Dylan Mortensen opens the door, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And that final time that she opened the door was after she heard crying. She heard crying, and that is what allowed her to, I don't say allow, that's what made her open the door. She heard crying and was confronted by this person clad in black. Frozen shock fear, frozen shock state, remember. Now, we then spin that complete narrative all the way around and say that this was a party house. The fact that someone was seen in the house was not unusual. So this is why she went back in the room and went to sleep and didn't think nothing of it. Now, I think that this was done for a specific reason. This was done for a reason because, again, like yesterday, I said this brought up so many questions frozen shock fear, frozen shock state. So how then can you give such an insight into what you saw, what you heard, even giving an interpretation of the face of this person? He had bushy eyebrows, he had a black mask on, his build. She took all of that into consideration while simultaneously in a frozen shock phase. People aren't going to buy it, and that will get pulled apart in court. Now, it's easy for us, because we've got no skin in the game, to not take everything into consideration. But you do have to take everything into consideration. And I put this to you, that 8 hours is a long, long time. We're supposed to be led to believe that someone entered this house and done this crime in around 10 minutes. To enter, find, dispatch, clean to some degree, and leave. Within 10 minutes. But then it takes 8 hours for law enforcement to be called. Now, somebody who reached out, they'd said, look, she was just protecting herself. She'd done what she did to make sure she was not another victim. Good on her. But I put this to you. She goes back into her room. She has a phone. Now, a child as young as 5 years old could call 911. In the video I did yesterday, I showed you a clip from a situation where people had been shot inside their home, and their child, a 5-year-old child, had called 911. Now, this girl, this teenage girl, young adult, didn't call 911. Also, the other person in the house didn't hear anything. They're in the basement. This is Bethany Funk. And it would appear that nobody used the bathroom either. From when this happened, potentially before, unless they literally used the bathroom just before this happened. But they'd been out, been partying, whatever they'd been doing. They'd been drinking, gone to bed, and they didn't use the bathroom until midday. And why is that important? Because where the bathroom is located, on the floor where Dylan, Xana and Ethan were, the bathroom was outside Ethan and Xana's door. And in the affidavit, we hear that as the officer approaches the door to Xana's bedroom, he sees what has happened. He sees them. He doesn't have to enter the door. The door is not closed and he has to enter. He sees. They're out of the room. I'll also say that the camera picked up the thuds, the whimpers. So it picked up the same noises as what Dylan Mortensen had said she had heard and why she came out of her room. The crying. Same. Matches what's on the audio of the camera. So the camera audio was picked up, which must have been loud enough to trigger that camera. If that's triggered on audio or visual, or whether it's just recording constantly, which not many of those do. Many of them are triggered by either audio or visual movement. But what was Dylan Mortensen doing for 8 hours? Have skin in the game. Put yourself in a position where you have skin in the game. You have lost a loved one in this situation. And you know that there was 2 other people in that property. One of them didn't hear anything, but they were apparently in the basement. But cameras outside the property were picking up the noise. And then you've got Dylan Mortensen, who was on the same level as 2 of the victims. It would appear that the victims, at least one of those victims, was hurt outside of the room. So not in the room, in a shut door, outside the room. And it would appear that there's a potential for what happened here, and I've said this before, is that whatever happened on the top floor was heard by those down below and was enough to rouse Ethan and Xana. And I believe that Ethan came out of his room, found, and there was a confrontation out in the hallway. And I believe that Bethany potentially didn't hear anything because she was in the basement. But I cannot accept that Dylan Mortensen didn't hear anything. I cannot, because she's already said that she'd heard crying, and that is what led her to open the door. So if she's heard crying and she's come out and opened the door, who has she heard? At that stage, who has she heard? She's heard, potentially, if that person has then left, she's heard either Ethan or Xana. So she's seen them coming from Ethan and Xana's room. They've come round, walked past her, and out. So please tell me how someone can hear these things, shout, telling people to shut the fuck up, hear crying, come out to check, see someone leaving, and then not call 911 for 8 hours. And this is the have your cake and eat it bit. Because if you're going to turn around and say, well, she was frozen in shock and fear, this was PTSD, then how can you take her description of what she saw and her version of events that evening, how could you take that as gospel? How could you take it as accurate? How could you take it that what she's saying she saw is what she saw? Could she have missed something? Could she have missed a second person? Did she miss the first person leave and just see the second person leave? Is that why she didn't say that this person she saw was holding a weapon? She didn't say that they were covered in blood. These are the questions that the defense will pull up. How credible is your witness? Could they have missed anything? And why did it take them that long to call 911 when they called pretty much everyone else before? Did these witnesses see what had happened and make a conscious decision to call other people? And if so, why? What was their motivation for calling other people first? What was going on? What did they know? And what story did they have to get straight? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you all in the next one.